Welcome to the Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Becky Scherr.
And I'm Michael Brodkorb.
After a week off due to an awful illness, I am pleased to be back and so grateful to my co host for holding down the fort and having some great conversations while I was gone. We are just 3 weeks out from the election, and it is going to be fast and furious until November 5th. Today, we are going to break down JD Vance's recent visit to Minnesota. We will hit on the recent NBC poll and chat further about the state of the presidential race with just 20 days to go. Then we will follow up on Michael's conversation with Brian Strasser last week about the controversy and trouble surrounding FEMA, its workers, and the ongoing hurricane relief efforts and misinformation. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. Michael, I want to start by thanking you for carrying on in my absence while I was hacking up a lung last week. Nobody would have wanted me to be here, but I listened to both episodes. It was great. And I just want to touch briefly on a couple comments, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
First off, I want to start off with I was blown away by the conversation with Representative Elliot Engen and Julius Hernandez. To think that these two very young men are so respectful, so elegant in their verbiage and their speaking to each other, their view of politics and partisanship. It's just so refreshing. I mean, I have had the privilege to join you for a number of conversations with both of these two individuals. And I know that that's nothing new. That's something we've heard time and time again from these two. But I think it's something that when folks think about young people in politics these days, we think of what we see on some college campuses and on social media and just kind of this ruckus, kind of vitriolic way of doing and acting. And it's just these two are such good role models from opposite sides of the aisle, such good role models for their peers. And to be honest, to all of us about how you can be on opposite sides, you can have opposing viewpoints, you can find commonality, but you can just be respectful when it comes to policy and politics. And it was just fun to listen to. And I applaud you for conducting that interview and that conversation, and the two of those individuals for being here and continuing to be a beacon, a shining light on the hill of what we can hope for the future of politics.
I appreciate that. First of all, you were sorely missed. You bring a sense of calmness and organization to this podcast. So you were very sorely missed.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm glad you're feeling better. I was going to try to go with you were like on your court ordered, like something like you're picking up trash, but you beat me to the punch and described it accurately that you were feeling well. But I'm glad you're feeling better. But you were missed, and it's great to have you back. I really enjoyed that conversation. It was a really fun conversation to have. Those two know each other, and that's the exact type of stuff that you and I are interested in, which is having conversations, finding ways in which people can disagree, but not be so disagreeable. I will say to you that I am more and more disappointed in rhetoric, conversations, and particularly social media. And there needs to be more Representative Ellie Engens and more Julius Hernandez's and more Brodkorbs and Becky and Michael and whatever out there talking, because we need to do more of that stuff. And those types of conversations are just really help recharge my jets. And so I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. And I'll hold my comments on the Brian Strasser interview because we're going to actually get into a little bit further a conversation about everything that's going down on as it relates to hurricane relief efforts and kind of the chaos surrounding all of that. So we'll chat more about that in a minute. But we're going to chat about JD Vance was back in Minnesota. So he came in for a private fundraising event and then did an event at the shuttered 3rd Precinct in Minneapolis. Now, this is the second time we had Speaker Mike Johnson here for a press conference there. Curious your take. I like the little smirk I'm getting right now, but before I get into my thoughts on the matter, I wanna hear what you think about, one, the visit, and two, the event the unannounced stop at the 3rd Precinct.
Well, first of all, as I'll continue to say, in interest of full disclosure, I'm a Republican for Harrison Walz. It was interesting that JD Vance flew to Minnesota, didn't have an event, didn't have a public event. He came in to take some money from some donors, which is his right to do. But there was no public rally, no show of support, no enthusiasm around Vance's campaign. About the Vance Trump campaign. We don't know how much money they raised. We won't know probably till after the election. But Minnesota, it's a clear indication to me that the Trump campaign recognizes that Minnesota has no significant political value to their electoral strategy. It has a money, I want Minnesotans money strategy, and I want to do a quick press conference. But there was no rally, no event, no enthusiasm, no airport rally or anything. And I think that shows that the Vance Trump campaign or the Trump Vance campaign wanted to get into Minnesota, take what they could, and then get out. And one little side. Well, just go ahead and you can respond.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that there wasn't some sort of gathering. I've been to these sort of events before where they will do a private roundtable. I mean, even at the hotel that's right on the airport grounds, right? Because one thing that is needed to be taken into consideration anytime a campaign, presidential campaign, makes a stop here, they're not making a stop somewhere else. And so they do certainly need to be stingy with their time, which we'll chat about a little bit more in our next segment because Trump's making some interesting stops these days. But was surprised that there wasn't like a roundtable and even some sort of kind of more intimate, 150 gathering. My thought is similar to yours, that I do believe that Minnesota is out of play for this campaign. Whereas the stop in front of the third precinct does have a more of an ability to generate some media coverage that has the ability to go into Western Wisconsin, which is a state in play. And so I think that is probably where they got some play. They always say you want voters, you want either votes, money, or press out of everything that a campaign does. And so this was clearly focused on the money and maybe some press. They did do the stop at the third precinct. Again, Mike Johnson was here a couple months ago. Second congressional district candidate Joe Tarab was there, retired police officer. They hit on the riots, 1,400 businesses destroyed, 500 million in damages. And Vance, one of his lines was, "The story of Minneapolis is coming to every community across the United States of America if we promote Kamala Harris to president of the United States." Now, I personally don't think this is a huge off-topic thing for them to hit on, but is it playing? Because to me, it's something that I expected to see a little bit more. When we saw Mike Johnson here, I thought that this
That's Speaker
with
Johnson to
walls
you, okay?
was what was it?
That's Speaker Johnson to you.
Speaker,
Let's
I'm sorry.
yes, yeah.
You're right, the Speaker of the House. I really thought when walls got tapped that we were gonna be hearing a lot more about this. We were gonna be seeing more ads. We were gonna be hearing about the impact on some disadvantaged communities. We were gonna be hearing about the grocery deserts. We were gonna be hearing about the schools and the meals that were impacted of these students. We were gonna be hearing, I mean, there's a lot to hit on if you wanna hit on it, but it's been so few and far between that, like, was this a best use of his time?
I think it's the only. I mean, first of all, the Republican message has been so terrible on this campaign, particularly Minnesota Republicans on Governor Walz. It's been so all over the place. They've hit him for not having a dog. They've hit him with a bunch of other kind of ridiculous conspiracy theories. And so I think that the message, I can't hear you. You're just yelling at
I
me.
think it was that they had 2 dogs and they were lying about which was the real dog, not that he didn't have a dog in general.
Well, yeah, well, whatever it was, any oxygen spent on that was a fantastic waste of time. And as a Republican who is supporting Harrison Walz, I'm really glad that all the oxygen that was spent by Minnesota Republicans and other national goofballs pushing that narrative. This has to be a pretty significant blow to the spirit of Minnesota Republicans that are advocating and that are supporting the Trump Vance campaign, to see Vance come to Minnesota, get off a plane, go right to a black limousine, get driven right to a fundraiser, take checks behind closed doors, stand up at the third precinct, and then get out of town. I mean, that shows that that's a belief that I think number one is the Trump Vance campaign has come to the realization that having Vance or Trump doing any type of large event at this time. Not, and there's still time between now and the election, but right now they didn't want to dedicate their candidates' time on the ground with a rally or some type of event. They wanted a very structured event for the vice presidential candidate JD Vance. They wanted Minnesotans' money, and then they wanted to get him out of town. I think that that's an indication that the Trump campaign clearly does not think that Minnesota is in play, and what they want is they want to poach Minnesota for its fundraising money, which is fair, and then they want to come in and do a bracketing event and feed that message out nationally. The only reason why I think Vance came to Minnesota was not because they think Minnesota is competitive, because it's not for Republicans in this election cycle. They wanted checks. They wanted to stand in front of the third precinct, lob some bombs, and then get out of the state as quickly as possible. And that's got to be a tough message for Republicans to see this close to the election, because I think it's a realization that, contrary to all the chest pumping and spinning, that Donald Trump and JD Vance are not going to win the state of Minnesota.
And to play devil's advocate, I will say that it is not
Of
uncommon.
course.
I believe Kamala Harris is probably doing lots of stops where she goes in, gathers checks, and gets out. But I think the relevance here is that it's our state, Governor Walz's state, and a lot of conversation that's been had of
Yes.
whether it's in play or not. In 2020, Donald Trump had a huge rally here, I think the first week in October. And so things are clearly different, and it's clearly different than they were even 3 months ago. And so Vance did allude to the fact that Trump could be back in. And again, we'll chat. Let's hold that conversation for the next segment, because I think it's going to be interesting to hear how he's been spending his time.
I could get a 32-inch waist and a full head of hair, but it's just not in the cards. One other point I'd make to you is that the city of St. Cloud is still trying to collect an invoice for the last time I think Trump and Vance were both in St. Cloud. And it's a couple $100,000 that they're owed. Interesting. I don't believe that JD Vance zipped up to Stearns County or to St. Cloud and dropped off a check and paid off that bill. He did again come to Minnesota, take some Minnesota, which is perfectly legal. It's permissible. I mean, I'm not saying a candidate can't fundraising, but there is an invoice owed in St. Cloud for an event, and hopefully at some point the party of fiscal responsibility, Trump and Vance, will realize that they have to pay that bill, and hopefully they do it soon.
All right, heard.
You would agree that they should pay that bill, Becky?
I would absolutely agree that campaigns should pay the bills, especially. I mean, these are some small towns that put a lot out. I just got to chuckle sometimes when I feel like I get a talking point from your advance document. Maybe.
As if you don't, as if you're not there, like you have been sitting there for the last week, just boop-a-doo, typing away, coming up with talking points, because Becky
I
doesn't
love
come up
it.
with talking points.
I love it. That's exactly what we do. I mean, that's what we've been doing for decades now. So hey, uh, keeps things fun here.
This comes from the heart, Becky. This isn't a
It
talking
comes
point.
straight from the heart. But I do agree. I mean, I think unpaid bills are just bonkers that they get away with that. Moving on, NBC poll and kind of just general chat of the state of the race for the presidential race, how things are going. We have a new NBC poll that just came out. It was conducted October 4th to October 8th. Neck and neck, literally tied, 48-48, just 4% undecided. As a reminder, the first poll NBC did in September, the first poll with Harris as the candidate for the Democrats had Harris at 49 versus Trump at 44, with 7% undecided. So this is a swing. I do fully believe it's kind of some of that momentum evening out a little bit. And I don't think this is a complete shock. I think that this is something we and I have talked a lot about, of any given day, one of them could be in the lead. I mean, I think we're seeing this in swing states. They're neck
It's
and neck.
fantastic analysis. On any
Thank
given
you.
day, one of them can be ahead. That's just compelling and rich.
Most generic. Oh, reminds me of Karen from Veep, where I am right
Yeah.
now, watching,
Yes.
saying something without saying anything. But I mean, I feel like it really could be this, that today Trump could be in the lead, tomorrow Harris could be in the lead, the next day Trump could be in the lead. I do think it's neck and neck. What's your take on this? Do you think, I mean, polls are historically not the most reliable lately. What do you think?
From the heart, this is a flip of a coin race. I've been telling everyone since for the last month or so, if not more, this will be a flip of the coin race until election day, and anything can happen. And that's where that's my analysis is going to change that. What's a couple interesting points, and I want to make sure I'm being accurate when I say this, but from media articles and other smart people that I've seen on TV talk, this is one of the first elections since I think modern polling where one candidate has not polled above. There hasn't been a +5 margin between the candidates, and so I think that this is going to be an incredibly close race between now and election day. Truly flip of a coin, and it's going to be it's going to make a lot of people nervous. And it's going to be fun to watch and exciting, and we're going to be here for the ride. But I truly believe it's a flip of a coin.
If our listeners are not aware, I do love polls and I love all of the kind of minor things that we can pull from polls at times. A couple things that I think came from this one is that they're not hugely surprising, but I think the margin did surprise me a little bit of the gender gap between Harris and Trump. Harris's women support Harris by a 14-point margin, and men back Trump by a 16-point margin. That I don't think is something that obviously it's unique. Again, we don't have a ton to look back on of men versus women when it comes to our presidential races. But that's not just double digits. That's within the double digits and very stark numbers there.
Yes,
Uh,
and it's interesting. I mean, it's a contrast. I think that this is a very polarizing election. I think the data is going to be interesting to watch. But again, I think it's going to be nerve-wracking and interesting to watch every single poll that comes out. But I honestly, and I guess I don't know what give me your take, but I don't see this unless something really substantive happens. Um, I think this is just going to be a neck and neck race until election day.
Completely agree. I mean, we've had wilder things happen. There can be an October surprise. W- who knows? But I feel, despite this, the 10% of voters in this poll did say that they might change their minds. I don't truly. I feel like they want to be open to letting things play out, but I don't. I think that number is far smaller.
One additional point I make about polling is, and I'd be curious your take on this. I've heard, and there's been some discussion about Republicans being somewhat sheepish, or let me rephrase it: Trump supporters being somewhat sheepish with pollsters saying as to who they support. I also think that in 2022, the polls were off of it because I think abortion is a subject that people will vote privately on, and so I think I have again, I come from the premise that this election is going to be close. Again, flip of the coin between now and election day. What I think it's going to be very interesting to see after the election is why the polls differed from the why the polls differed from the actual election results, and they always do to some degree. But was there some unpolled undercurrent going on where there was a larger block of voters who were either Trump supporters who didn't want to say it, people who were voting privately in the ballot box related to abortion or other types of subjects. It's going to be really interesting to watch.
Mhm. I completely agree. As much as I love a good poll, I love a good postmortem. So I am excited to
Oh, that's
analyze
creepy.
that all after the
Yeah.
election as well. Which can I just say, and I know it's different because I spent a decade like in the trenches, deep in campaigns and politicking. Um, it doesn't feel to me like we're 3 weeks out. Does it feel to you like we're 20 days
You,
away from the election?
you think it should be? You think? I mean, what do you mean? You think it's? You think?
I
Does it
don't
feel
know.
like
Am
it's the
I?
day before, or is it like?
I feel like we're like months before. I don't feel like
Oh no.
I don't feel, no, you don't agree?
I think this is we're in the silly season.
Yeah.
This is the silly season. This is where I think some people struggle with the pressure cooker of what's going on in an election. But it's gonna I just yeah, I mean, it's gonna come fast. I mean, we got 3 weeks from today. I mean, 3 weeks from
Mhm.
today, depending on how you count it. By the way, let's have this quick discussion. If you're doing a countdown to election, so I consider it to be 20 days from election, not 21.
Oh,
What's your take
thank
on that?
God. Um, I do too. And I said 20 minutes or 20 days earlier, and I honestly like struggled whether I was going to put 20 or 21 because there is you can go back and forth of whether it's you count election day or you don't count election day. There are 20 days until election day, right? So there are 20 days between now and election day, and then you wake up and it's election day. So you don't count that day.
So we're in agreement that so on the breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, we do not count the final day. It's up to that day.
Correct.
Fantastic. That's
That's
one of the
correct.
only things we've ever agreed upon.
I genuinely got nervous when I put that in though. That's why I said
Yeah.
3 weeks at one point, and then I
Yeah.
did change it up. So that's really funny
Yeah.
that you bring that up. Thank you.
Yep.
A couple other points I want to hit on here. There is a little bit of a popularity flip for Harris. In September, she was 48% positive, 45% negative. Now sitting at 43% positive, 49% negative. I don't think that's super surprising as things move on.
Welcome
And
to the
it's
campaign.
right.
That's what happens.
Trump is also sitting at 43% positive, 51 negative. This is his highest positive since leaving office. So a little notable there. One thing that I thought was really kind of interesting from this poll was perceptions of the Trump and Biden presidency and whether this Biden presidency is still impacting Kamala Harris. So they asked voters, did the administration's policy help you and your family, hurt you and your family, or not make much of a difference? When it comes to Biden, only 25% said helped, while 45% said hurt. And when it comes to Trump, 44% said Trump and 31% said hurt. Do you take this to be anything other than history has a way of looking kindly on presidents? More time has lapsed since Trump, or is there anything that you point to for this?
I think it's the economy. I mean, I think that Donald Trump inherited a magnificent economy from Barack Obama. And then in the midst of it, there was a pandemic. And it was a chaotic time in 2020. And so the country's fought back. And if you look on a calendar, if you look over a contextually over a calendar, I mean, there are some issues that the Harris campaign is having to deal with regarding the economy and what's going on. And I think Trump, this gets to an issue which I think is really challenging. I think for the Trump campaign to get in a groove on, which is discussing right track, wrong track, how people feel. Trump does not want to talk in that way. He does not want to talk about that stuff. He wants to talk about, JD Vance wants to talk about dogs and cats being eaten in Springfield, Ohio. They want to talk about all these other issues rather than right track, wrong track on some of this stuff. And so I think that this is why the race is so close. Is because I do believe, looking at the data, that people do have an impression on the economy under Trump. That's their reality. And in some ways, looking at some of the statistics and the economy that Donald Trump inherited, sure, that's absolutely could be the case. One of the reasons why I think this race is so close, looking just at policy, is because of the economy. I think some of the issues that are, I'm not saying the economy is not important to me, but as someone who's staked out a claim based on the reasons that I've staked out, I'm much more of a realist, I think, when it comes to what the president of the United States and administration can truly do to impact the economic policies of this country. It's a collaborative effort with Congress. There's outside factors that come in, such as the pandemic and other things. And so this was why I think you've delved into very precisely why this race is so close.
Um, when we do look at the issues, none of those are surprising at all. They've continued to be abortion as the top issue for most important to voters. Immigration, voter security is number 2, protecting democracy or constitutional rights 3, and cost of living number 4. And so I think it is time and time again what we are seeing. We are seeing a lot of those conversations. But I agree with you that I do think that if Trump and Vance focused, wouldn't it be nice if they focused on economy and cost of living? I do think it would have potential to give them a point or two that could make a difference here. And it's a little to the detriment of that campaign that they're not doing that. Um,
On the
but
subject of abortion, on the abortion 22%, is that in your position? is that pro-life voters concerned about abortion, or do you think it is uh, pro-choice abortion rights advocates wanting to make sure that there's bodily autonomy and that women have their healthcare options?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I would give like far majority
Yeah.
of that to the pro-choice voters who believe that Trump and the Republicans could significantly impact women's rights, women's ability to choose for themselves, families' abilities to make choices that are best for them. Just heard another story of a woman who has a non-viable fetus at 12 weeks, but lives in a state with a ban. And because it is not a threat to her life, she either has to go elsewhere or carry a non-viable fetus till however long, either her body or full term, and then as births a non-viable child or stillborn. And it's just the the more stories that we're hearing, I feel like lead me to believe that it is women who are, or not just women, it is voters who are concerned about stories like that, who are concerned by the choices being taken away, by their rights being violated, and kind of this handmaid's tale sort of way of living that there's a fear for them. I certainly do think that there are some that have abortion as the top right because they truly look at this as murdering a child, killing an infant in the womb. And so I think there is some of that. But yeah, I think probably largely I would do like 75-25 on that.
Yeah, I would maybe even from my perspective, maybe even a little bit higher because again, one of the issues that I've spoken with a lot of Republican men about in this state and in some others is about why they're voting for Harris and Walz is because they want to support because they have a wife, they have a sister, they have an aunt, or they just passionately believe that the government shouldn't involve themselves in a healthcare decision that a woman needs to make. And so I think the vast, vast, vast majority of those are those type of voters.
When we also look at the breakdown of who is best at handling or who voters believe would be best at handling some of these key issues, Harris does have a 19-point lead over Trump when it comes to handling abortion. And so that certainly, has just a 3% gap there. Harris also wins on healthcare and being competent and effective. Trump's top issues or qualities are dealing with the border, handling the situation in the Middle East, and dealing with the cost of living. Again, I think that kind of aligns with what we've seen from polls over the last couple of months. Nothing super surprising. One thing that I love a good historical tidbit. In this poll, they said 62% of registered voters believe the upcoming presidential election will make a quote, great deal of difference in their lives, which is the highest response on this question since 1992.
That was my first election that I voted in 1992, and I will say to you without any hesitation, I do. So one of the things I think we've talked about on this show about is some people sometimes feel the first election they vote in is the most important election they've ever voted in. And I'm not going to lie and say that I thought the 1992 election was important. I still remember all the buzzwords, but I have been very consistent that I think this election is the most significant election of my lifetime. And I put it at the top. I put it over the 2004 election. I put it over the 2000 election. It is without a doubt the most significant election that I've been a part of. And so it is, it's really interesting to see that resonating with people that this is an election that will make a great deal of difference in their life because I do believe the stakes are that high.
It's funny you mentioned 2004, and this is not an age thing, but that was my first election, and I do believe that was a significant election, and really what got me started to be interested because there was so much tension and conversation about what was going on. President W. Bush, who I'm a big fan of, and just really what was going on at that time. But
I would have
hey,
pegged you as a John F. Kerry voter.
no, not my guy.
You're a big
I love
W
me
fan?
some
That's great.
W.
That's great.
But hey, I've a lot of elections. I've had a lot of tears and a lot of. I mean, man, elections are a stressful, emotional time. But I don't disagree. I think this is something that, for a multitude of reasons, for all of these top reasons, right? The impact on abortion, the impact on what's going on in our foreign affairs, the impact on our cost of living and our economy, what will happen to our democracy either way. I mean, it is kind of mind-boggling to think of the implications that this election will have, regardless of who gets elected. Both Harris winning or Trump winning have so much that comes along with it, and I don't know that my mind can fully comprehend that. And we'll have many conversations after the fact as we start
Yep.
seeing stuff unfold. But yeah, man. Last comment on, well, we kind of already chatted about it. Swing state polls are, I mean, again, neck and neck. Trump has a slight edge if you look at Real Clear Politics, that average them all. They're all between like 0.2, 0.1. It's wild to me. Have you, in your history of looking at polls and looking at swing states, is this the closest it's been across the board? I mean, I feel like usually we see like, three of them going one way, three of them going the other way. This seems crazy to me.
Yes, this is it's every day matters in this campaign. Every day matters, and it's going to be. As I said before, I don't believe that this election is going. I don't think we're going to see, unless there's some big event, unless something significant happens that we can't predict, or something along those lines. Unless there's some type of big October surprise, I don't see how this. I think this election stays this way, and I think that's going to drive some people crazy. I think and it's already starting to, because I think some people are people are in a pressure cooker. This is going to feel what this election is starting to feel like for, I think, a number of people, is if you've ever been to Valley Fair and been on the corkscrew, just that kind of tick, 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 tick up before you go down. And there's a bunch of people that are that tense right now. And I think it's great. This is a fun election to watch. I'm excited. But it's very interesting to see how just amped up people are and tense they are about stuff. And I simultaneously believe that this election is the most significant of my lifetime. But you want to know what? Sun's going to set, sun's going to rise tomorrow. And we still got a Vikings game on Sunday. And we're going to have a Vikings game on a few Sundays after the election. And so I'm trying to keep everything in perspective.
I appreciate that. I do want to say, so I mentioned it before in a couple times in recent episodes, but we're rewatching Veep, and if you're a political nerd and have not watched Veep, I highly encourage you to go indulge. It brings some levity to the chaos that are these campaigns and these election cycles. But right now, we're just getting to the part where, spoiler alert, there's a presidential tie, and it is wild watching that go down, and something hopefully we'll never see in our lifetime. But crazier things have happened. So maybe we'll have a electoral college tie in November 5th, and then chaos can continue beyond. As
Who's
you
your
talked
favorite
about,
candidate on Veep?
my favorite candidate.
Yes.
I mean, Tom James is just spot
Yes.
on, right? He is
Yes.
just perfect. Love him.
I
Hugh
like,
Laurie, so good.
yeah. I mean, obviously I like Julie Louis Dreyfus
Right.
as Sonny Meyers. I'm a big fan of the Roger Furlong, the congressman senator from Ohio. He's got a great way of just putting together some insults, and my
His
goodness, he's
zingers are
good.
insane.
He's really good, and there's certainly not PG. There certainly are, and some of them are actually probably NC-17. They're pretty
Oh,
rough,
yeah. Pretty
but
rough.
it's all fun and games.
But if you've been around politics, you know that that's not too far from the truth, and sometimes how
Not the
things
way I ever
go.
spoke in politics.
No,
Maybe you
never.
have. Maybe
No,
you have, but
never.
not me. Yeah, exactly.
We've been talking about how everyday matters here. So kind of pulled together some of the recent and upcoming campaign stops from the last week or the upcoming week. We had, like we mentioned, Vance is in Minnesota, and is heading to Pennsylvania. Walz is doing a couple stops in Wisconsin, heading to Pennsylvania as well. Harris is spending some time in Michigan, also going to Wisconsin. But let's chat about President Donald Trump. Last week, he spent some time in California and Colorado. He's spending some time in Illinois. He has rented out, I think, Madison Square Garden for an event in New York. Now, a couple stats that came from this article. A Republican has not won New York in a presidential race in 40 years. It's been 36 years since the GOP has won California or Illinois, and Colorado has not voted for Republican at the top of the ticket in 20 years. This is an interesting way to spend his time.
Yes. This will be this if Trump is not successful, people will look back at him spending time in California, New York, and Illinois as not a good use of his time. If you remember in the 16 race, people said Hillary Clinton just went back to Wisconsin more, she probably would have won. If Al Gore wins his home state of Tennessee, it doesn't come down to Florida in 2000. And so ultimately, there's a strategy behind this, but it's not a let's win New York, Illinois, and California strategy. It's to go there and message outward from those states. Right?
What do you think can be absolutely? I mean, and what do you think can be attributed to this? Is it just Trump being headstrong, saying, "I'm picking where we're going, and this is where we're going"?
Yes, I think he's looking for messaging opportunities, not necessarily electoral strategy messages. And those may seem different, but if you think about this, so let me just be as fair as I can here. JD Vance came to Minnesota yesterday. He came in to get money. He did a press conference and then he left. So he didn't do any kind of mingling with Minnesotans to try to win their votes over. He spoke to a fundraising crowd and then he did a press event. Now, that press event obviously has an impact because we see it on local TV, Becky. But as you know from your comms and PR experience, what they're doing is messaging out from there. They're bracketing outward. And that's what they're doing. And so, and let me just be, there's nothing wrong with JD Vance coming to Minnesota and raising money, doing a press event like that and leaving town. What it shows to me, and there's nothing wrong with Trump doing this in California, New York, and Illinois. But the significance of both events is that the candidates are really not in play there. Vance is not in play in Minnesota. Trump and Vance are not in play in Minnesota. And based on all available polling, Trump is not in position to win California, Illinois, or New York. What they are wanting to do, or in Colorado, what they are willing to do is they're willing to spend time in there to message outward because there's a traveling press corps that goes with them. They can have the event broadcast everywhere, and they can create some kind of viral messaging and viral opportunities in these states to highlight local issues that resonate outward. And so that's kind of what JD Vance did in Minnesota yesterday. He went to the 3rd precinct, made a series of allegations and statements and tried to portray that in a framing and bracketing that benefited his campaign, not necessarily in Minnesota, but benefit out of this state and message broadly across the country. But what he didn't do is he didn't spend time interacting and having a rally with Minnesota voters because that's not a good use of his time because he's not going to win here. And so Trump, I think, is doing a little bit of the same, except in some of these, particularly the Madison Square Garden event, he's having a very large event.
The thing that's the most surprising, because I get that. I do think that there is something to that. But when we were chatting the other day with, I believe it was when we had Will and Anna on, and talking about the Trump campaign's strategy to target some low propensity voters, I feel like the rallies in these targeted states are a great opportunity for that, right? You have your friend, you're not maybe one that doesn't vote all the time or not super passionate, but you go to a rally with your friend or you have a friend that goes to the rally. People like to be wooed. They like to hear, there's a reason that rock stars are on stage and saying, "Hello, Minnesota." Like people like to hear their state, their town, their, community mentioned or wooed or important to these voters. And so it just feels like we're 20 days out and I get it. There's a time and a place to go all these places, but it's such a missed opportunity and really frustrating. And I think something that if Trump is not successful, that they can point to say, like, look at you had multiple days, 2-3 days of missed opportunities connecting with voters in these swing states that actually could make a difference, whether it's 500, 1,000, 1,200 votes that could get you over the finish line. And it's nothing surprising anymore when it comes to President Donald Trump, but a little
So,
shocking.
so you don't see, you see the messaging benefit, but you think, do you see the messaging benefit? Your argument would be do the same message, but do it in a state that you can actually potentially pick up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because my thought of this when again, when we're talking to the strategy of the low propensity voters, I don't think a low propensity voter is spending their time in October watching CNN, watching MSNBC, and getting this
How
messaging
dare
from an
you?
event in Colorado.
How
I mean,
dare
mass
you?
generalization, but if somebody is not typically somebody who is impassioned or driven to vote, especially when it comes to a presidential general election, I just find it hard to believe that that's where they spend a lot of time getting messaging. Whereas if I believe that they would get a lot more from social media. And so, again, when you have President Donald Trump in your state and you're seeing your friends and your family and your coworkers and your colleagues and your mechanic or whoever it is posting on your feed about all of this, that's where I feel like the opportunity, if that's truly their strategy with these low propensity voters, is you need to go that way. There is absolutely a messaging opportunity when it comes to these other states, but I don't believe it just doesn't seem to fit into what they are saying their strategy is.
Yeah, and you know where voters get a lot of their information from is from,
Us.
look at that, from the
Can
TikTok.
we
And
talk about that?
I joined the TikTok. Is that
I
what the kids call
saw.
it? Do they call
You've
it the
been
TikTok?
crushing it, man.
I joined the TikTok, and I appreciate Julius's comment that I'm the king of TikTok. Yes, I am the king of TikTok these days. I joined the TikTok. Is that what they call it? The TikTok?
It's just TikTok.
I'm just joking.
My
Yes, I
husband likes
joined
to call it the Tic Tac, so
the TikTok. I like that, but
yeah,
he's a Packers fan, so I can't use it.
there you go.
Yeah, I joined TikTok.
Everybody go visit and follow. Is it M. Brodkorp like everywhere
And in
else?
Brodkorb on TikTok. And I appreciate. I think the CCP is watching me in China. And look, if China wants to know what I'm up to, I'm I'm comfortable with that at this point in my life. I turned 50, past the Cocoon Brimley line. What else
I
can someone know about me?
I don't think you've been, hiding what you've been up to, your social media up to this time. Might as well join the TikTok.
And if there's anything that yes, and if there's anything that people need, it's more of me on social media channels
Absolutely.
and platforms. And so follow me on TikTok at mbroadcorp.
There you
You're
go.
on
I
TikTok
love it.
too. You're on
I
the
mean, I am.
TikTok,
I've
aren't
never posted, but
Okay.
I do like to
We'll talk
scroll.
about we'll talk about that off air.
All right. Last thing I would have for the presidential campaign, the Harris campaign has surpassed $1 billion since joining the race. Very significant. Um, I don't really have a ton to say about that.
I'm just proud that my first financial contribution to a presidential campaign put them over the $1 billion mark.
It's all thanks to you, Michael.
Yep, it is. It was my first presidential donation I made to a presidential. I was
I
shocked when
love
I
it.
learned that. I've never been a
Uh,
big donor, but I did make I did put my mark in history.
uh, Congratulations. I applaud that.
Thank you.
I lied. I have one more comment. I'm not normally a big SNL watcher.
Okay. Oh
But I
boy.
gotta say, so we're new season started. The coverage of the presidential race is so good. It's
Yes.
so good. At least you got to watch the cold intros. Maya Rudolph is back playing. She's playing Kamala Harris. We have one of the cast members, I forget his name, playing Trump, does a great Trump. Um, Dana Carvey playing Joe Biden is like everything my heart could ever hope and dream for. The Joe Biden, the guess what?
Yep.
He just always his little thing. Guess what? And then don't you know? He's so funny. The Governor Walls is great.
Jim
Jim
Gaffigan.
Gaffigan, so good. They just did an episode and kept calling him Governor Waltz, and it's just fantastic. But it's so good. I really love it. It brings some good, nice lightheartedness to this heaviness of this campaign season, and highly recommend to go check it out if you have not yet.
Yes. One last point on that is I've been seeing the reaction on social media. Apparently, people are there's a people who are paying attention, I think, for the first time, and they're trying to draw some data point with Saturday Night Live making fun of candidates. Guess what, folks? Saturday Night Live makes fun of Republicans and Democrats all the time. If I read one more time that so and so is done, if you've lost SNL, you're this, you're that. Go through the archives of SNL.
Oh
They
my
make
God.
fun of everyone, and I would encourage
Since the
people to
beginning of
look.
time. This is like the
Yes,
50th season. It
yes,
is nothing new.
yes. I would remind people to remember that they're President Trump, President Obama, President Bush, President George Herbert Walker Bush, President Clinton, all the way back, Ford, Carter, Nixon. Nixon, SNL wasn't on when Nixon was on. Nixon was president, but they all were lampooned. They were all made fun of. It's an American tradition. Just relax, sit back, and watch TV and have fun.
It's so good. And
It's
it's
so
just
good.
like, just go and enjoy it. It is one time to be like,
Yes.
we are literally living a comedy, and it just makes you feel a little better about the situation.
Dana Carvey did George Herbert Walker Bush.
Was he?
Yes. Yes.
And guess
I
what?
think
And by the way, I
yes,
just
he
can't.
does a
I
great
just
job.
can't.
He does a great job.
So good. So good. All right, moving on. Almost done here. Wanted to chat a little bit. So you had Brian Strasser on Thursday for a bonus episode. Um, his knowledge on the emergency relief efforts, FEMA, everything was just so compelling and so helpful. So many things I didn't know, and just kind of dispelling some of the misinformation and disinformation that's going on out there. So shout out Brian, great job, and great kudos to you for pulling some of that stuff out of him to dispel some of that misinformation. But I want to throw it to you to kind of chat about this recent story we had coming out this week in North Carolina.
Well, first, let me just say before we start throwing a bunch of accolades Brian Strausser's way, we on the breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, we recognize that he's an expert on misinformation and on matters related to the Second Amendment. He is not an expert about sports, and so let's just be clear: we're not interested in Brian Strausser's position on any sports-related matter. And I hope Brian's listening. He is, by the way, he's a grown-up in an absolute room full of children on social media and stuff. And so I so appreciate Brian Strausser's approach, his discipline, his willingness, his fidelity to the truth, and how he presents himself on social media. He's great to follow. And I follow him across all social media platforms, particularly on Twitter, which can sometimes be a cesspool of misinformation. Brian laid that out very effectively in the last episode, and I would encourage our listeners to follow him on Twitter for his misinformation and Second Amendment takes, not his sport takes. But we were discussing FEMA and the misinformation. We went through a number of examples of misinformation, but just recently, in the last, I think, 48 to 72 hours, there was an incident of the man was arrested for threatening FEMA workers in North Carolina with an assault rifle, and that there was also some FEMA people that were pulled out temporarily because there were, I guess, militia people that were out there trying to just hunt and target members of FEMA. This is ridiculous. This was what happens with misinformation, and I just want to put on my. I'm not going to take off all of my partisan hats for a second and just remind people. This is what happens when there's danger in elections and misinformation, and this is why people have to have a fidelity to the truth and what they're doing. And because social media amplifies everything. And when you have, I remember when I was doing training and I would talk to people about social media, I would say, look, if you have 1,000 subscribers on social media, let's say you have 1,000 followers on Twitter, that's 1,000 people that have signed up to listen to what you have to say. And you and I have both done comms in before social media, kind of in the traditional sense. And I would kind of paint this picture of people like, look, you can walk into a room and there's 1,000 people just waiting to hear what you have to say. And so recognize that power exists. With power comes great responsibility, and you need to be careful of what you share. And we've seen time and time again this election cycle, and outside of the elections, where misinformation leads to dangerous situations. And what FEMA is what's happening on not only with the FEMA misinformation, but how members of FEMA and other people that are involved with relief efforts in the aftermath of natural disasters, the way they're being targeted is just shameful. I would encourage our listeners, again, follow Brian Strausser on social media. listen to our episode that we've had with him on. He is a great resource for dispelling misinformation. And it was a wonderful opportunity to talk with him, not about sports, but about FEMA.
Absolutely. It was a great listen. And just really unfortunate. There are people who have lost everything, people who have lost their lives or lost loved ones. There are still people missing, and we don't even know what that number looks like yet. And to think that the folks that are there on the ground trying to help and get some relief and organize the chaos that is in these places where, I mean, the images are just horrifying, um, that people are targeting those helpers, is really, really sad, really unfortunate. And of course, the misinformation that is coming out. Brian really detailed where the different budgets that things come from and the different management of things and how states fly in to help, and the structure and organization of all of that it is not just done willy-nilly. It is not just because illegal immigrants are getting something, which whether I agree with that policy or not, that is not taking money away from the hurricane relief efforts in North Carolina and Florida and the states on the coast. So it was really good to hear. I hope a lot of people listen. And again, I know you guys talked about the bumper sticker that he had shared, but we just all need to do a little bit better about getting some more information before criticizing or jumping on some bandwagon. And I think Brian helps do that. And I'm glad we are able to have him on and help amplify his knowledge on that.
Yes, Brian again is a resource on a variety of subjects, and we're glad to have him on and talk about stuff. I don't give a darn what he says about sports, but on every other subject, he's great. By the way, I have one FEMA story to share.
Great, go.
Um, so I may have mentioned this before, but my kids love to go antiquing or thrifting, and so I was in Iowa a few years ago, and I was at a thrift store, and they had a FEMA jacket, and like the kind of you'd see like the blue kind of
Yeah, I can
windbreaker
picture it. Yep.
with big FEMA letters on the back. I bought it for like $3. And so up in my closet upstairs, I have this kind of government issued official looking FEMA
Yeah.
jacket. I was gonna wear it for the Strasser episode, and I was gonna throw it on for today for this episode. I didn't want to be respectful to FEMA. I don't want to portray myself as a government official, which I'm not. But FEMA's doing great things, and I got to be honest with you. I might probably wear that jacket as a FEMA supporter. Obviously, I will disclose that I'm not an agent, but it's kind of a cool jacket. And
That's really cool.
FEMA's doing good stuff. It's got a reflective back and the FEMA letters, so I could be like out like with traffic cones, like move along, people. There's nothing to see here. Mind your business. But I wouldn't ever represent myself as an agent of the government or an agent of anything.
Great to clarify.
Thank you so much.
Speaking of sports, let's go into our last one
Oh,
here.
great.
So, football. We have
Bum
tied
bum
for the
bum
last 3
bum.
weeks. Our picks for the
Yes.
last 3 weeks have been the exact same. One all the way down to 7 points. We both had dismal, weeks up to 11. I think that we both got this week.
You
I
know why I
just
think that
can't
is?
catch a freaking break.
Do you know why I think that is?
Why?
I think you're
Because you're
taking
cheating?
advantage. I think I was going to say I think you're taking advantage of the manager mode that you have. And you're going in
Oh,
after I make my picks, and you're copying my picks.
right. That
I
is
think
it.
what we need to do this week is screen capture our picks as they're made, and just make sure that there's no funny business.
Sounds great.
Um, yes, but so who's in the lead? I should have checked before this show. Who's in the
So
lead?
I think Mike Zipko and Matt Anderson are in the lead in our league. Yes, Matt Anderson, who works with me at Velocity, Mike Zipko and Will are tied for second. And then you and my husband are tied for fourth. That's
What?
cute.
I'm tied with a
Yeah.
Packers fan?
Yeah, you are.
That is,
I'm tied for sixth with Ben Golnick and Mark Drake. Good company there.
yes. Well, I have to get out of that. I mean, and just so we're
Your
clear,
wife's having a little bit of a rough, do you give her a hard time?
no, I'll give her a hard time. So you're at sixth. I'm at fourth.
Correct.
Yes. Again.
Yes, so
So
you are
again,
winning.
what's my mission? Just repeat to our listeners what my objective is.
It's just to win. It's just to beat me.
That's right. My objective is is to just beat you, and then if I can win the league, that's great. By the way, how many years have we been doing this?
This is our second.
And who's the reigning champion?
Okay.
That's
Technical
right.
difficulties.
Technical difficulties. I've heard that before. Well, Becky, thank you so much. Any other subjects you want to get into before we shut this down?
I don't think so. I'm all
Well,
tapped out.
it was great for you to be back. You were missed. As I said, you bring a calmness and an organization to this, and you were missed. It's great to have you back. Glad you're feeling better. And we will be back soon. The breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. Let me start over. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform where you listen. You can also leave a review on our website and follow us across all social media platforms at BBBreakPod. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky will be back soon. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye.